Good afternoon. This is Master Yao, and this is the Grantron Life System. This is the series Royalty and Alchemy, Episode 1, the full title being Hidden Royalty and the Decline of Alchemy. Before we begin, I want to really thank you, my listeners, for your support. I'm still getting mail, email, and text and comments from people about the series, the Master Yao Chronicles, that we did back in, I think it was 2018, 2019. We're still getting positive feedback from that. It's very gratifying. That's been somewhat of a, in the last few months, there's been an increase in the demand for more content in light of the fact that we totally redid the Grantron catalog. And in answer to that, we're going to be doing these series. So we have 3 series coming out that are, that's going to be generating a lot of free content that we're going to be putting on YouTube, Instagram, Vimeo, etc. Follow the links that you'll see in the different headings. But one of them is Royalty and Alchemy. One of them is the positive reinforcement number. In Grantron, we call it PRN. That's a big hitter right there. And then the last one is the revitalization of our sex life, or revitalization of the sexual energy for singles and couples. And that's going to probably be the last one to roll out. That's the biggest, quite a complicated program. So the programs that are already out are Exit Up from Extreme Religions, the Spiritual Entrepreneur, and the Grantron Life System, the expanded version, the big version, which is to some extent the current Tantra course that's live. But these programs that are going to come out in the future, we're sort of putting a lot of free content out there in video form and some documents ahead of time so that people can kind of understand what we're talking about. There's so much content connected to these programs that we just can't put it all into even a 4-month program. You can't stuff it all in there. So we just, that the programs will have the actual, working framework, the working platform for doing that thing. But the series that we're going to put out in advance is going to have a lot of good information too. I think you're going to enjoy it. Okay, let's get started. Okay, let's just first of all say, we're going to go down the rabbit hole, and a lot of the terms and concepts that we have in Grantron are not at all mainstream. Okay, and we're on the fringe of it, because it's next level stuff. It's it's normally 5 or 6 years before people sort of figure out what we're talking about and start getting on board the other organizations and whatever. But I think we're going to start with just the simplest definitions that we can as to what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. So the first thing is, let's talk about what we mean by royalty. Okay, and excuse me for reading part of it, but I don't want to, I want to make sure that I stay crisp and clean. So royalty, by definition, we're talking about, royalty is a marker attached to the DNA. It's not the DNA, no. It's a marker, a chemical marker that's attached to the DNA by like a methyl group that's attached to the histone spool at that's inside the DNA helix. So that, biology, chemical people will know what I'm kind of talking about. And if you take the science of epigenetics, they go into all this stuff in great detail, okay? But I'm not going to try to use all those big terms. I don't understand half of them. But basically, we're talking about epigenetics. Now, most of the times when they're talking about epigenetics, they're talking about family curses. They're talking about people who have a predisposition towards certain diseases, illnesses, or they're talking about people who have certain types of criminal behavior that's in their family line, their family history, stuff like that, okay? But in this particular case, royalty is one of these epigenetic traits that humans have. Um, the chemical markers are different, and the way that it shows up is different because basically now there's two things that set it apart. Number one, we're mainly talking about positive traits that are being flagged, right, by these signaling devices. And we're talking about things that the chemical markers are not oppressing the trait, the attribute, the gene, but they're in fact calling attention to it and causing it to be more commonly and widely expressed in that person's personality profile. So it's going to change your behavior. To some extent, it's going to change how you appear to people, and it's going to attract things to you, wealth, sex, things like that. It's going to have the tendency to attract that more. Okay. In the case of royalty, these selected genes tend to be more positive in nature and they are emphasized, not suppressed. The important point to understand is that these signaling devices, these methyl groups, or whatever you want to call them, these things that are markers, that are signatures attached to the DNA, attached to the genes that actually do the expression. These things are not just physical. So you have these chemical markers, mainly carbon-based things, right? And then you have like what I call electromagnetic markers. So it's also something that exists in the electromagnetic realm, okay? It's also photovoltaic. In other words, it's light sensitive. In other words, it's activated by light to some extent. And you're going to say, well, how do you get light inside of a cell, inside of the nucleus, inside of the DNA spiral? Good question. And so, you need to understand that this type of light that we're talking about is not contained or not blocked out by physical matter, okay? Just like neutrinos pass through things. So this type of light is generated in the nucleus itself. It's not generated by the sun or the outside. It's generated inside the cell. And we'll come to understand these concepts a little bit better as we move forward, but it's pretty neat stuff. Okay. Another important thing about the definition of royalty is that royalty is not just about the traits people themselves exhibit, their attributes and traits. No. Royalty is just as much about the fact that royal people are influencers. They tend to influence what other people do. And in fact, it's a vibration. This vibration, the longer you keep it, the longer it causes other people to be drawn to you. And eventually, for those people, after a couple of decades or a long time, those people begin to develop the royal attributes as well, just by being in your presence. Okay. So, the definition of royalty is a lot more. All right, but let's just, let's break away for a second and go back to why we're having this discussion. So, as you have no doubt guessed, most of the people with royal or noble titles aren't really royal, right? No surprise there. So true royalty is an organic thing. It's not. It has nothing to do with titles, nobility, and all that kind of stuff like that. No. I mean, it may help to create that kind of stuff down the road, but no, that's not how it begins. That's not how royalty starts. I think you would also be surprised, in my estimation, that royalty is more common in the population than people guess. I mean, we tend to think that it has to do with people who are emperors and people who are kings, people who are presidents, and things like that. But I think it's a lot more people who would be judged somewhat regular in the early stages, and they're perhaps not judged noble or royal, or they're not elevated to some type of an office or station until much later in their life, and maybe even after 2 or 3 generations have passed. And just like royalty exists, it is constantly being depleted, mainly through things like wars, migrations, dislocations, strange kind of marriages, the marriages that are not organic, marriages that are not indigenous, shall we say. So that the time is constantly grinding down the part of the population that's royal. So our population of royal people is constantly being depleted, declining. And so how do royal people come into existence in the beginning? Well, there is a natural process, the natural forces do it, but that's not how most of them come into being. Most of them come into being through a process we call alchemy. And most people don't use that term with any degree of seriousness. But okay, let's take a look at this definition. Let's take a look at the definition of alchemy. So alchemy basically is the science of changing the makeup of a thing, the foundation of a thing, or the inner nature of a thing. And when we talk about alchemy formally, we're basically talking about something that involves metaphysics or magic. Now, when you talk about metaphysics, that's self-defining. When you talk about magic, what we're talking about here, we simply mean a science that the general population does not yet know. So 300 years ago, the science of killing germs with antiseptics was magic. And like, just like right now, if you go to the right population, talking on a cell phone is magic. And there are many other things, when people see me do Tantra, to them it's magic. They don't know how the heck I do it, okay? But that doesn't mean that it's not possible to do it, not possible to teach it. It is. And many things that we think are magic are quite valid. Our ignorance prevents us from understanding how it works. That's okay. We're not trying to put people down or up, whatever. But supernatural things typically are more natural than natural things. They're things they're not less conforming to structure and science. They are more conforming. In other words, they conform to science and structure and the way things are supposed to be so well that they work much better than normal natural things. Okay, they're natural things to the next order. To really kind of help you explain this whole thing of alchemy, I want you to understand, humans have 3 bodies: cell body, energy body, light body. All right, we talked about this before. And here is the key to the understanding of alchemy in this series. All right, the change agent in most cases of alchemy, when we're talking about the creation of royalty, that is, involve a thing that exists on the light body realm. In other words, it exists, but we can't perceive it here on the cell body realm. All right? Or it's an action that occurs on the light body level. So it's an action involving something having to do with the light body. So our light body is aware of it, or our auric field is aware of it. But the physical body and the nervous system may not perceive it that well. It may get a hunch or whatever, but it's not following it. It's not able to determine what is observable, it can't use the 5 senses to detect this thing, right? So we say it's magic. Something happens, we don't know why. And a lot of the stuff that we are talking about in terms of royalty, and why royal people are different and how you create them and what's going on with that and why it's so important to know who is royal and who is not and whatever. Eh, a lot of it involves the light body in the auric field. Okay. Humans have been using alchemy to make people royal since the beginning of time. It's not something that's new. And the origin of most royal people is through alchemy. But in the last 200 or 300 years, the practice of using alchemy has declined precipitously. And what I mean is that people have either forgotten how to do it or they don't think it's important anymore. And this has gone hand in hand with the fact that the population of indigenous peoples around the world has been declining because the indigenous peoples were the greatest source of royalty that we had. Right now, a lot of the reincarnation royalty is from Native Americans, African Americans in America, and certain people of Eastern Asia, East Asian derivation, and they became royal, and they passed from in this lifetime they're getting it from past life, and so in this lifetime most of their people are killed or moved or migrated or they've changed religions or things like that. So there's no way for the royalty to continue itself, right? In many cases, their actual bloodlines, it's hard for them to connect to them. So you got these three ways. We'll go into that later. How you measure your royalty. We're going to get to that. But the point that we're trying to make now is that this group of royal people, this population of royal people, has been steadily declining, and there are problems, there are complications that prevent the people who past life were royal from being royal in this life. Okay. And so if we don't change the whole thing with the alchemy, there's a potential problem developing. We're going to get to that. One of the functions of Grand Trine as an organization is to help create more royal people and to help the people who already have a little bit of royal stuff going on to get back on track and to activate that royalty. I'm going to get there. What I really want to say is that the process of our alchemy process in Grand Trine has become very, very advanced. And I guess the people who know about these things, when they see what we're about to say in this series, this free series, they will be shocked. They will be shocked. So here are the three ways that we basically deal with royalty today that we need to. Number one, royalty via the past life. So that's the reincarnation route. So you were royal in your last life, you died, now you came back. You can't connect to your bloodline, but because you were royal in the past life, a lot of the setup is still there for you to be royal if you can make the connections in this lifetime. As I said, a lot of Native Americans, a lot of Blacks, a lot of Southeast Asians. And if you look at the history of these things in the last 600 years, you're going to understand what I mean. A lot of times their people just aren't in the same place and aren't doing the same thing anymore. So they had to come back because they were royal, but who do you come back to? You're part of the, Ulagawa tribe in Missouri, Native American, and they haven't been living there for 300 years. So, you come back to the same place, more or less. You try to come back to the same people, the same bloodline, but where is it? So you come back, but, the route for you to connect to your royalness is difficult. So we're going to talk about that, okay? The second way, you're born into a royal lineage. And this is much more common than people think. There was a lot of Black royalty that left Africa. A lot of Black royalty. But unless that house that they belong to is still functioning, still maintaining their legacy, they have no they're connecting to the blood. They're born into a royal family. But number one, they don't know they're royal. And number two, they're not connected to wealth or a nation or to any kind of a prestige or title. So they're not connected to the house that that house that they used to belong to. So they're not considered royal. All right. But they're in a better position than the ones from reincarnation. The third and the most direct scenario, the best scenario, is you're connected by both past life, you're royal in the past life, and you're born into a royal bloodline. At least on one side, the father side or the mother side. They may not both be royal bloodlines, but you're born into at least one royal bloodline. And depending on, what's going on, it can be somewhat easy for them to regain their full royal status, or it may not be that easy. Marriage is probably the biggest problem because a lot of times the male side is still very royal, the female side is not. Or the female side is very royal, the male side is not. You understand the complications we're going to get to. We're going to get into all of that. Typically, you need to confirm this through a past life regression, which I can tell you, I've contacted 3 of my female consorts from past lives that were connected to royalty. But trying to connect with them in this lifetime is beyond difficult. And the third scenario is oftentimes people who have that direct connection to royalty, they don't have all the epigenetic issues most people have. They're clear, the blockages are few. And so their histones are relatively few, are relatively free of the dark markers or the methyl groups that are the suppressing kind, okay? That's connected to like family curses and things like that. So if the person has those, if they have that direct connection through past life and into the blood, and they typically, they don't have all the epigenetic issues, boom. Now we're talking about that direct royal connection, and they're going to start to rise up. It doesn't mean that they can't, be brought down by past events, by current events, by marriage is the main way that their ship gets sunk, because there's so many bad opportunities for marriage today. And I'm talking about around the world. I'm not just talking about for Black people or white people. I'm talking about around the world now at this point in time. We're going to narrow it down later. So that's so important that they don't have all these blockages and juju and genetic curses and stuff like that. And if they marry somebody who is almost as pure as them, yeah, they're going to rise. Now, if they don't, if they marry somebody that's got a lot of family curse stuff, they can still get there. It's a more difficult thing. And these topics are really important. You're just going to see that it's going to explain so much to you. Those people that take the program are going to come out empowered in ways that people just will have a hard time imagining. It's going to be one of the most empowering programs we've ever done in Grand Tron. So I'm very, very pleased, and we're going to be releasing a lot of video in this series and a lot of free information on those 3 things: the PRN number, revitalizing your sex life, and royalty and alchemy. Okay. I am Master Yao, the founder of Grand Tron. I'm very pleased to once again be sponsoring some type of series that will bring us together in dialogue and expansion. Have a good one. Bye-bye.